The Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings, alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu, like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davison, Lynette's is open for takeaway, noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit for this Friday, June 4th of 2021. Happy Pride Month. And the reason I mention that is because Pride Month is going to feature in one of my nominees for Schmuck of the Week a little bit later on. You won't want to miss this one, everybody, I promise. But before we get to Schmuck of the Week, which we do at the end of the show, we're going to go through the big stories of the week that happened. And I always have a wonderful panel here with me to help me sort things out, including Allan Lengel of Deadline Detroit. Hello, Allan.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Nancy Derringer, also of Deadline, is with us once again. We appreciate it.
Always.
Lawyer Steve Fishman from his office in beautiful downtown Detroit joining us once again.
Beautiful Ford building.
And, of course, sitting in at the last minute for Todd Perkins is my friend Greg Bowens, of course, longtime PR person, political consultant, former spokesman for Mayor Archer, and, of course, a civil rights advocate as well. Greg, welcome back. It's a pleasure, and thank you for doing this so last minute. I do appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, of course. Well, all right. So, we're going to talk infrastructure here in just a little bit because we've only got 2 months left to get a deal done. And why do we only have 2 months to get a deal done? Because apparently in August, Donald Trump's going to be reinstated as president, according to Donald Trump himself. This is what he's been telling people, and this is what he's been getting fed by some folks out there. But all kidding aside, I mean, first of all, there's no way that could possibly happen. Just in case you read something on Facebook, everybody, and somebody says, well, Trump's going to be reinstated in January or August. There is no way for that to happen. It just cannot happen. It would be a coup if it actually did happen. And that's the only way something like that could happen. Nancy, you've been chomping at the bit to talk about this.
I was just going to say that the thing is, I mean, yes, of course, you're absolutely right. And conservatives that still have one foot in reality have been saying this all week long. The problem is he is going to make that a condition of his endorsement. I mean, this guy still swings a fair amount of weight in the Republican Party. Actually, he swings all the weight in the Republican Party. And he's going to start, it'll be like, well, how do you feel about my reinstatement in August? And the people who are not brave enough to tell him it's not going to happen aren't going to get his endorsement. And that's going to be a big thing to lose. So, I have never, American history has been, I mean, how long have we been on this continent? Hundreds and hundreds of years. But I don't know that we have ever had an interlude in our history that is quite as stupid as this one.
Of course we have. All right. Of course we have. This is America.
Yes. Steve, then Greg.
I think that, as usual, the Donald is confused. The word he meant to say, rather than reinstated, I think he meant to say he's going to be indicted. That's how he's just a tad confused as usual.
Well, he is a tad confused. And I mean, this was just sort of a sidebar to what I actually want to talk about. But I mean, people are suggesting that the window is small for President Biden to get an infrastructure deal done. He wants to get this done before taking on some more serious and more contentious issues, such as voting rights and things like that. But he looks like he's willing to make a deal. He has backed off on some of his tax reform ideas, agreed to a smaller amount of money for infrastructure in order to get a bipartisan deal. Now, we talked about this a little bit last week. And at this point, is any bipartisan deal, better than going it alone and just marshaling through what it is you want to see done in terms of the actual investment that people suggest we need in this country?
All
right, Greg, then Allan.
Okay. No. I don't think it's worth it at all. Certainly I'm a partisan when it comes to these kinds of issues. And one of the things that seems to be true is that the Republicans, like we would be, Democrats, are looking towards the midterms. And if everything shapes out the way that it seems to be, the Republicans, aside from their crazy QAnon conspiracy, Trump's going to be in office in August, crazy stuff, are running against the left. They're not even bothering to single out people anymore because, in part, Joe Biden's favorability ratings are still so high. And so you only have a small window, 2 years really, to try and ram through stuff in your 4-year administration. And this is the time to do it. The time to do it is now. Just, bust through the filibuster and get the votes that you need, and let's, get it moving. And it's sad to say, I mean, he should know it better than anybody else because he spent so much time in the Senate.
Okay, Allan, go ahead, because you wanted to chime in on this.
Yeah, I wanted to say I agree with Greg there. Right? I mean, we need to start getting things done in Washington. I mean, we've gone way too long with nothing happening. With it's so hard to get things through. The thing I was going to say is that it's really sort of amazing. The Democrats, it maybe shows us sort of the weakness of the party is that they should be so much more dominant than they are, with a party, the opposition party, run by crazies, run by a mental illness that is the head guy. Donald Trump is not a well man, and all these other spineless sycophants are following him. I mean, what a great opportunity for the Democrats to say, hey, we stand for something like mental health.
Well, I mean, here's the thing that's standing in the way of this. Obviously, you've got Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who are Democrats, but are standing by the filibuster as supposedly an important piece of our democracy. But notice this one thing, is that the Republicans got rid of the filibuster for two things they thought were really important: tax cuts and Supreme Court justices. So if they want to get crap done, they don't give a damn about the filibuster. They really don't. It's all a sham. And so Sinema and Manchin buying into this, I'm sorry, they're being duped. They're suckers. They're worried about getting elected in their red states, potentially red states for Sinema, although Arizona's trending blue. The Democrats need to actually do something to ramp up the pressure on these two, because the filibuster, like I said, if it's this important institution, then the Republicans would not have gotten rid of it for the stuff that they give a shit about, because the Democrats need to do the same thing for the stuff that they give a damn about, and they have not been willing to do it.
Amen.
Ooh, the four-letter words are flying. All right.
That's hardly a four-letter word in these days. I mean, I heard a little kid say that on the street the other day. He was 4.
Oh, what? I would have grabbed that kid and said, I'm going to wash your mouth out with soap, little boy.
Hey, don't touch somebody else's kid. Never a good idea.
Well, that's true. You're right about that. Just ask Gantz in Florida.
But I mean, I don't see the willingness to do it. And I'm trying to figure out, and Allan, just in case you have to duck out a little early, which you may have to today, but you had Joe Manchin as your person of the week, your schmuck of the week. Because of this.
It drives me crazy. I mean, look, he's pandering to, he's so worried about, he's in a state that's really a red state, and he's doing everything to just accommodate people at the cost of progress in Washington. And, he needs to be a Democrat or get out of the Democratic Party already. Just,
West Virginia, maybe. I'm sorry. Go. You had your hand up. Let's go with.
That's what I learned at Bagley Elementary School. You put your hand up. On Roselawn, you couldn't just talk whenever you wanted, or somebody's dad who just served in a war would come and whack you upside the head.
I'll defer to you, Mr. Fishman.
So, Joe Manchin, I agree with everything you guys are saying, particularly Allan's position. If you think about it, he could be Times Man of the Year if he did the following. Look, I'm 72 years old. I'm up for election whenever the hell it is. I've had a heck of a career. I'm going to do what I think is right, and let the chips fall where they may. And then interview and talk about that and all those kinds of things. And the guy would be honored everywhere. Is it really that important to these people? Greg, you know better than any of us because you've been involved with politicians, for a lot. Is it that important to people like Joe Manchin to maintain his Senate seat into his mid to late 70s, that he'll prostitute himself for these other people? He has to know that these people are crazed and that they don't give a shit about the country or him. Could you explain that to us, if it's possible to explain? Are people that tied up with the job that they have? It just sounds crazy to me.
Well, one of the things that you get from being in the Senate, having covered the Senate myself,
is rich.
Well, there's that. You do tend to get rich, But you also they also tend to take a longer sort of term view on things as opposed to reacting. The Joe Manchin that you're seeing today is the Joe Manchin that you saw 10 years ago. Not much has changed with that guy. And so let's not act brand new when he, swings to the right or doesn't toe the line, as it were, when it comes to being a Democrat. So I really don't think there's anything new here to see. The only thing that's new about Joe Manchin and what's going on is where the party is in relationship to him. Certainly, the Democratic Party is not as centrist as it used to be.
Sure.
And I would dare say that President Biden has even surprised many of us on the liberal progressive side with his actions. We thought it might be a rehash of going way back to the Clinton years and trying to triangulate and get the middle and all this stuff. But clearly the country as it is now is because we are more polarized. And I hate to say that it's polarized. What I'd like to say is that people are now taking a side where before they loved to be more in the middle of the road.
Well,
and when
can I just say one thing though about?
Ahead,
I just want to say one thing about West Virginia. West Virginia is it's a red state, it's a Trumpy state, but it is a very poor state. Okay.
Oh yeah.
It's mining is pretty much gone except for maybe some strip mining still. And, big coal peak, we've passed peak coal. I mean, coal is in eclipse now. And it's like, if Joe Manchin really wanted to keep his seat, he would be all in with some of the help that the Biden administration is trying to extend to people, lower income people, and
right.
Get them back on their feet. I mean, that's what I find so appalling. It's one thing to be a centrist Democrat. It's another thing not to serve your damn constituents.
Well, and how hard would it be to sell this, that you're going to be like, hey, look, all of you people who have been suffering in this hellhole of a state, this mountaintop removal state that we live in here,
right?
You're going to be getting cash to get the job training you need so you can actually make your state competitive for the industries of the future.
Right.
You will get cash so your children don't go hungry. You will get cash to supplement your educational system, which is just in disarray. I would have a list. I would have a giant poster that I carried around with me showing how much money the average person in West Virginia is going to see as a result of these bills.
Right.
And I think most people will be like, well, that's not so bad.
But Craig, they've already gotten cash. They've gotten cash, from Trump. They've gotten cash from Biden now in the form of stimulus checks. And if that hasn't moved the needle to them in many ways, in fact,
I think it has.
They're giving out cash to people to get a shot. So
right.
It's the idea of folks not realizing how much money they can get in their own pocket. I think is not really moving the needle. Well, actually, I think it's moving the needle a lot more than what folks are opening up to. People realize that they see money in their pocket. They just don't. Nobody has time to deal with the intricacies of this big bill. Just what is it? It's going to be jobs. It's going to be opportunity.
Now,
that's what it's going to be. It's going to be better roads. It's going to be,
I wasn't around for the debate over the federal highway system during the Eisenhower administration. Did we go through the same sort of thing with that? I mean, I don't know. Or did everybody just sit there and say, hey, that's a great idea. We need freeways and we should pay for it. I'm just trying to understand if the debate was similar when it came to projects like this.
The debate is always the same because people start screaming communism and socialism,
Yeah, well, there's a whole lot of people that got jobs from that socialist WPA program that needed it at the time, and it seemed to make a difference when it came to combating the Depression. But hey, what do I know?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm just not sure we're going to see anything there. I don't know if there's going to be a deal, and I'm not sure that anybody on the Republican side is acting in good faith. There's a meeting this afternoon, allegedly, with one of the Republican members and President Biden to see if they can sort of see what the weather is on that side of the fence, but I'm not sure. All right. Do we want to talk about Fauci?
Oh my God, the Hillaryization of
but his emails. Fauci's emails have been released.
Exactly. But his emails. That's what it is. I mean,
smoking guns abound, apparently.
It is so shocking to compare like the coverage of that story in a mainstream newspaper and say Fox. I mean,
Yes.
you know, a sane person reads, you know, some of these exchanges that he's having and sees them for what they are. You know, a guy who is dealing with a crisis, who is, you know, trying to steer a ship through a very stormy sea, aware that this is a brand new disease, that we don't know anything about it, or what we do know about it is very limited, and is trying to do the best he can. And what, you know, wingnuts see is something entirely different. And I just, you know, I keep coming back to the old we're not entitled to our own set of facts, but apparently we are. So that's the way it goes.
You know, and I can only imagine how many emails that guy was getting at the beginning of this from everybody he knows at every institution around the country, every hospital doctor that he knows, every, you know, research institution, all the pharmaceutical companies, World Health Organization people, different countries. Fauci probably had a pretty hefty email inbox at the time.
And he apparently tried to answer,
tried to respond to people. And a lot of them were just sort of like cursory, hey, we're working on this together. Let's see what we can do. You know, just sort of like, I don't have time for this right now, but I'm going to respond because I respect you. But, you know, Tucker Carlson's treating this as if, you know, we've got the smoking gun and the Chinese are behind it and Fauci was culpable. That's
absolute horseshit. But, you know, I've been breaking the explicit language barrier all over.
I think Fauci. I think Fauci is really a true American hero.
Yes,
and that he stood his ground pretty much during the Trump administration, which was just nearly impossible. And I thought he did a great job of navigating through some of the biggest bullshit that this country has gone through.
Gave us a great meme too.
Yeah.
The
oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that one.
One of my favorites.
Well,
go ahead, Steve.
I don't really see. I hear what you guys are saying. You guys pay a lot more attention to what's going on in the media because you're part of the media than I do. But the issue about did it come from bats or did it come from the laboratory? I don't think is one you can just say, what the hell? I mean, even Fauci is saying that you can't say for sure. I don't think it's that this whole business is complete horse manure, like we were led to believe back at the beginning, when anybody suggested it might have come from a lab. I don't know whether it did or not, but it seems to me interesting to read about or pursue.
Well, there's a difference between it coming from a lab and escaping from a lab and being created in the lab. And that's, you know, I mean, that's the leap that a lot of people are trying to make, saying that this was done as some sort of germ warfare program that the Chinese were cooking up. I definitely think that they probably were doing some research on infectious diseases because China has a lot of people.
A lot of people.
Can we get a rule?
Well, you know what? Let's
you can't say on the one side, out of one side of your mouth, it's just the flu with a 99% survival rate. Calm down. We never should have had these shutdowns. And it's a bioterror weapon developed by the Chinese. Go ahead.
If we had not had shutdowns, it was already a disaster. It would have been a bigger disaster.
Well,
we've lost that.
Oh, go ahead.
We've lost 500,000 Americans. I think that's
600,000.
Yeah, I mean,
it's over 600,000
a lot of people.
Shutdowns.
But it's what troubles me about the Fauci coverage thing and this issue is that I don't think that the media has really, and we as an American public have really gotten down to what's important here. I have a friend who's a lawyer. He lives in San Diego now. He's from Detroit. I could say his name. You guys would know him. Very smart. And he has been on this thing for months. Like, where did the virus come from? And I said that, you know, no one's going to care about that until we get shots in people's arms. You got to stabilize the emergency. But now that we're getting past that, one of the things that I think the story is starting to reach to is our own culpability as it relates to, we just mentioned germ warfare, biowarfare. President Obama had outlawed the continued research of finding these emerging viruses in the United States. And my understanding is that companies then left the Carolinas in particular and went to Wuhan to continue that research. And so this is a sort of like string that's getting sort of, you know, unraveling the thread here in that neither side can say that it's not possible that this was not genetically researched. And they can't say that it was because we do that research is what I'm trying to say. So let's not be completely dismissive about it. The other thing is,
I don't think we're being dismissive.
Nobody's being dismissive.
But no. But the other thing is that Fauci is being tagged for his part in the research of these emerging diseases. Now, the NIH, that's part of what they do. But my understanding is, and I don't like to go down this rabbit hole because I get what you're saying. Fauci was my hero too. At the same time, we do have to be able to assign responsibility for something that should be outlawed. In germ warfare. I mean, this ain't World War II. This ain't 1919. The ability to continue to research this kind of stuff is a big deal, folks. And I think that the RNA that we developed, that everybody knows, is something that we have been working hard on for a long time. But the RNA is also a result of this research into emerging viruses.
Well,
so, Fauci has become the poster boy in many ways for how we handled or did not handle this crisis.
Well,
I am a fan, but I'm also a critic because I think he should have done more early on.
Show of hands here, though. How many people here would support an investigation into the origins of this virus and trying to find out as much as we can about where it came from, who's responsible, if somebody's responsible? This is something we should look at, right? Everybody's raising their hands. Everybody's got their hands up for those of you listening to the podcast.
Disagreeing with that.
Okay, right? The search for truth is very, very important in this. And if we do find that there were some nefarious actors, then I swear to God, I hope the international court, makes them pay some horrific cost. We should want to find out the truth. But now, these same people are going to vote for this are the same people who voted against an investigation into January 6th.
Right, precisely. And
it's take that for what it's worth.
Right. And it's the old, we have no attention span anymore. We just look at headlines going by as we're, on the TV in the bedroom while we're getting dressed. And we see investigation into the origins, possible lab leak. And they just jump to the conclusion that must be what it was. It's kind of like hearing there are unbalanced precincts in Detroit absentee counting boards and assuming fraud when, what we're dealing with here is like a handful of accounts that don't, or of precincts that don't match up. And the reason they don't match up is because people made simple mistakes. And it all amounts to no more than 400 votes out of 160,000 counts.
Well, and some of this is being amplified. Let's not forget, folks, that some of this is being amplified by the Russians, by the Chinese, in an attempt to continue to destabilize our democracy and spread misinformation. So, I mean, that's true and that's out there.
Yeah, very true. Right. But, it's one of those things, too. And I want this to be very clear. We can investigate this, but we need to investigate all aspects of our response to this pandemic, because do not let the Tucker Carlsons of the world try to use this as a way to paper over the response from the federal government at the beginning of this, because it was pretty atrocious. And so it all goes to play. Speaking of COVID, we need to talk about what's going on here in Michigan. The state found it necessary yesterday to come out and start talking about what happened in senior facilities here in the state when it comes to COVID numbers. Charlie LaDuff, of course, in Deadline Detroit has been writing a number of columns about whether or not we undercounted people. But now we have, of course, an official response from Elizabeth Hertel, who's the Department of Health and Human Services director, yesterday saying that she doesn't think that COVID-19 related deaths are being undercounted at any facility. But she did mention that not all are required to report this type of information. Go ahead, Allan.
I think it's interesting. I don't know that the state is being, sinister or anything about the numbers, but clearly the numbers are being undercounted. And what's happening is, Elizabeth Hertel, the health director, yesterday testified at the Capitol saying that she believes that the nursing home numbers are accurate. There are 435 nursing homes in the state. She said all 435 have reported. I believe them to be accurate. That what do they benefit from lying? Well, first of all, they do benefit from lying. And I'm not saying they are, but there are some benefits. I mean, if you're shopping around for a nursing home and you find out there are a lot of COVID cases there, you're not going to stick your parents in there rather than someplace that they've done a better job at. There have been a number of nursing homes that have violated laws, that have lost their licenses. So to say I totally trust the nursing homes is a little bit. So what's happening is the nursing homes just call numbers in. They don't even call in names. And so they need to do a deep dive into the death certificates, which they haven't done. They admit that there's a problem with, they don't have all the wherewithal, to do it. They need to do a better job with that. And then we have on top of that, what we're really is some of it's, we're talking nursing homes, and then there are adult foster homes and other care facilities. And really there's a more umbrella of elderly care facilities. And what we're talking about is that, as she was saying, that out of 311 foster care facilities, out of 311, 273 have reported, and all of them are required to if you have 12 or more people. Now there are a bunch of other facilities that are 12 or under residents, and they aren't required at all. So really the thing is, we're trying to get a handle on how can we do a better job of taking care of the elderly in situations like this. And until we have the numbers, I mean, if we don't have all the numbers and we say, yeah, things are pretty good, we're above average from, the national average, but we don't really know that. And so it's a little bit disingenuous, but at the same time, I don't know that there's anything sinister going on with the state, but we don't know the numbers. And Elizabeth Hertel did say overall, the numbers could be low. So, I think we do a little bit of, the Detroit News had the headline was Elizabeth Hertel says the nursing home numbers are accurate. And she did say that. But there's more to it than that. There's more nuances there.
Well, the one thing missing, I think, here in the state, though, that doesn't put it in the category of New York is an email chain from people saying that there's a deliberate attempt to undercount the numbers. Right. And I mean, I understand that people want to attach that same sort of significance to this here in Michigan. But what I think, if you looked at all 50 states and their data, I have a feeling that this is not something that's limited to Michigan and New York. It's just one of those things, a reporting system for a pandemic, these are one of the lessons you learn coming out of this, is that maybe you need to do a better job of tracking this stuff going forward. And hopefully there's an action plan that comes out of this as a result, because you don't want people put in harm's way. You don't want bad decisions being made that are going to potentially impact a big chunk of the population. And so I guess one of the things I'm concerned about is the automatic assumption that there was some sort of nefarious intent.
I think it's fair. I mean, there's no indication at this point. And is it benign that they just they haven't done all the work to vet everything? I don't know. I think they need to do a better job, and they're really, they're behind, and they're acting like, they're a third world country, that they can't get the hardware, the software to do that type of stuff.
At the same time,
well, I think the reason why it's like that, Craig and Allan, is because of this link and I love Charlie Duff. I mean, that's my man. He really goes at it. But this underlying sort of current that this is important because it means that the governor somehow was putting more people in harm's way by not, dealing with the fact that more people were dying in nursing homes than were being reported. Like, they're trying to suggest that somehow she knew that more people were dying, and that by shifting people who were COVID infected and shifting them to nursing homes, that increased the number of deaths and this, that, and the other.
Well,
I don't believe that at all. Not for 1 second do I believe that. But I mean, that's the underlying current.
I mean, look, it was a new pandemic. We didn't know everything about it. We didn't know everything about how to handle it. So I do think there was a sincerity there that she was trying to do what was best. And the question is, was it the best? I think that's something we need to examine. What's the best?
Well, best practices are something that I think will come out of this.
Right.
In 100 years, we'll forget it. It'll be another 100 years before this happens again.
Greg, your cynicism is noted. I'm hoping you're wrong. I'm hoping that we actually do have an action plan that somebody decides to read this time around and act on. I mean, look, every good company in America has an emergency plan, right? When it comes to communications, when it comes to actual physical threats to your facility, et cetera. They do this. Governments do the same thing, but people often will just sort of put it on a shelf and let dust collect on it and not bring it out until it's too late, or just reject it altogether and say, I can figure it out myself. That would be a really bad idea. There are so many things that we can learn. Well, getting back to the point here, there are a lot of things that we should be doing right now to make sure that if this ever happens again, that we are better prepared to deal with it. And I'm not sure that we're on that path. I hate to be that cynical, but
I'll be going, I remember back in 2021 when there's a plan out there.
Well, I have a question for Steve Fishman, because you were around a little bit longer, not much longer, but a little bit longer than us. In terms of, the polio shots, that were going on, and people just got them. They had to get them. That was it. I mean, the fighting that's going on over the vaccination still, over whether kids should get it or whatever, it's like, just step up. We've all been vaccinated in various things. I get the flu shot for probably the last 30 years. I've gotten the flu shot, which does not have an efficacy rate nearly what this vaccine.
I can tell you this, and I've told it to any number of people. Okay, number one, a lot of us who were born in the 40s have personal experience with people who had polio. My mother had a brother who was a pharmacist. He had polio as a young man. He walked with braces. Wound up having to move to Arizona because they thought it was easier for him to get around. So we all knew what polio was. In terms of getting the vaccine, I can tell you how it was at Bagley Elementary. We were 6, maybe 1955, whatever it was. Salk had come up with the vaccine. They made an announcement, everybody go outside and get in line. Zamp.
Screw you and your permission slip.
Your mom asked you what went on in school today. Well, we got these shots. Oh, good. Okay, go to your room. See you tomorrow. That was it.
Well,
when it turned into a tablet, they just gave it to us. That was it.
Well, speaking of this, interesting. There's the Michigan House yesterday passed a bill, all Republicans and 4 Democrats, I believe 4 Democrats signed on to this one, that would prohibit any public institution that gets public funds, including universities and schools, from requiring vaccination to live in the dorms, go to school, whatever. I mean, colleges have been doing this for years when it comes to things like meningitis, and you have to get that vaccine before you move into the dorms. But they want to exempt COVID from this for some reason. And they're trying. It's going to be vetoed, and they don't have the override power in the House to do this. But I'm struggling with the backlash on this one, and why so many people who normally would just be okay. The doctor says I need to get a shot. I'll get a shot. Are so reluctant to do this. I mean, this liberty argument is getting stale.
It's getting very stale, and I am really sick of it. It's this ignorant ass freedom, DUMB, at its absolute pinnacle. I remember I did a story on this a few years ago, and I'm talking to a doctor, and he said all of this vaccine hesitancy can be explained by the fact that, as Steve said, most of us don't have any memory of dealing with people who had to walk with braces and crutches because they had polio, kids who died in infancy because they got pertussis, whooping cough. I remember when I was in college, I had a boyfriend who had a place out in the country, and it was next to a dairy farm. And this is a kid from New York City, and he thought it was so cool to go next door, and the guy would give you like a giant gallon jug of unpasteurized milk. Okay, it had an inch, a couple inches of cream on the top. He just thought this was the coolest thing ever. The kid who grew up on Long Island, right? And I told this to my mother. She just about blew a gasket, because she had a memory of somebody who had in her class who had brucellosis, which is a disease that you get from unpasteurized milk. And she's like, if you if you even so much as open that jar and and think about consuming the contents, it's like you're coming home and going to Ohio State, and that was kind of like okay, Mom.
Well, just the thought of milk that separates is something that I can't tell you the last time I actually had a glass of real milk. It's been years.
Yeah, well, you're not a milk guy, but I mean raw milk. But again, raw milk is another thing that is catching on now because supposedly it tastes better and all the pasteurization harms good guts.
But here's
like everybody's listening more to their vegan nutritionist than they are to a guy who went to Johns Hopkins Medical School. So anyway.
Well, yeah,
I'm curious. I'm curious to what extent this will be corrected or driven by the workplace. I mean, at some point, Steve, what will be the responsibility of a workplace to have a bunch of people unvaccinated working in close quarters and spreading this thing around? Do you think that, lawsuits will eventually come and then shape public policy as a result?
We have had this discussion for the last 6 months, I would say. And here's basically what I have gleaned from discussing it with some of our federal judges. You have to keep in mind when people start screaming about lawsuits, about discrimination lawsuits, there are certain standard things that you have to show if you're going to file a lawsuit like that. We have discrimination on the basis of sex, on the basis of age, basis of race, the basis of ethnicity. Those are the established things. As far as from what I've heard, and this is from talking with federal judges, none of the judges I've talked to see any way that you can file a lawsuit saying you're being discriminated against because a vaccine is required in private industry, even in a public place. Although I will tell you, I know for sure the federal courts, for whatever reason, Chief Judge Hood and the rest of the judges have decided, I guess, that they're not able to require people to be vaccinated to come into the courthouse, probably because it's a public place and blah, 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 blah. But private industry, I have not heard one person, and this is including those who are sitting on the bench in the federal building, not one person that can say, you can scream about it, you can go on TV and go on their websites and scream about it, but if you bring a lawsuit like that in federal court, you're going to get tossed out on your ear because that's not something that's recognized as a basis for discrimination. You did it because I'm too old, that's one thing. You did it because I'm black, that's something. You did it because I'm a Jew, that's another thing. But you can't do it based on the fact that I don't feel like getting vaccinated.
Here's an interesting sort of caveat to that, though. And Mike Shirkey has been talking about this, of course, Senate Majority Leader. He had COVID, and new studies have come out that they just released a couple of days ago, some preliminary studies suggesting that your natural immunity to COVID lasts about 6 months, they're thinking, if you indeed had COVID before. Proving that you had COVID is probably impossible for a lot of people because a lot of people said, well, I felt a little sick for a couple of days. It must have been COVID. I think I got it back in February. I used to hear that all the time.
Antibodies.
The antibodies last about 6 months. So if you are naturally immune to it as a result of the antibodies, one, how do you prove that? And how does a business say, well, you know what? Sorry, you can't show that you're vaccinated. You don't get in.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, though, that it's going to be the same issue for Mr. Shirkey, the genius that he is. If he doesn't want to do it, that's fine. But that doesn't mean that a private place, a private industry, can't tell him, look, you show us evidence of vaccination or you can't come in here. It doesn't mean you got to go to jail. It doesn't mean you got to go sit in the mental hospital. You just can't come into my place of business unless you can show you're vaccinated. That's all.
They're still able to test for weed, right?
Sort of.
They do.
That's something that they're working on. Well, hold on a second here. Allan Lengel has to leave us in just a minute. And before he does, I wanted to give him an opportunity to give us an update on the situation involving Danny Fenster. He's a journalist who's been imprisoned in Myanmar for the last few weeks now. And, of course, I know that the Fenster family is good friends with Allan. And so what is the latest? Is the State Department getting involved?
The State Department's been very involved. I mean, the embassy in Myanmar, the U.S. Embassy, has been working on trying to get a visit, trying to get his wife in for a visit. She's been, I think trying to do whatever she can. They are working. I mean, the politicians have been in touch with, the Congress members have been in touch with the Fenster family, and to date, they have not been able to get contact with Danny Fenster. So they're pushing hard for that. And the family is, the son Danny's older brother has been doing a miraculous job of really keeping the story out there. I mean, they've been on CNN multiple times, CBS Morning News with Gayle King. They're keeping the story out there, and hopefully the pressure will at some point be enough to release them. So at this point, they're still pushing. They're doing everything they can. So.
Yeah, it's a rough situation, and please give our best to the family. We're hoping for the best. But if you want to know more about this story, there's some great coverage on DeadlineDetroit.com, including a great story that Danny Fenster wrote while he was in Myanmar about a guy who owns a bar in Myanmar who happens to be this massive M&M freak, and it really is one of the best written stories I've seen in a long time. So entertaining, and that's the type of stuff that he was doing, and it's just. You look at what journalists are going through around the world. And yes, we obviously complain about things in this country when, you now have the Justice Department spying on New York Times reporters. This is like that sort of slippery slope kind of thing that we need to watch out for. We're not imprisoning people yet. And I certainly don't expect that to be the case if we regain our sanity here. But other countries around the world, it is incredibly dangerous to do the work that journalists do. And Danny Fenster is an example of that right now. And hopefully he is going to be okay.
Maybe we can do a prisoner exchange, Danny Fenster for, say, Tucker Carlson.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, Allan, I know you got to get out of here.
Everybody have a good weekend. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
The rest of us will plod on for a couple of minutes because there are a couple other things I want to get to. I don't know if anybody noticed this, but Donald Trump, remember this triumphant return of Donald Trump to the internet because he was kicked off of Twitter and he was kicked off of Facebook. So he started From the Desk of Donald Trump, a new blog that has now been killed after 29 days. Apparently he was so upset at the low traffic on the site. And I mean, this is something I understand is low traffic on a site. I don't have a problem with that. But he was so upset about it, he just decided to cancel the whole thing and shut it down, put the blog out of its misery after 29 days.
Because the thing that guy fears most is to be seen as a loser, right?
Well,
Well, yeah, and I read the other thing is that he was mad because people were mocking him and making fun of the things that he said, and stuff like that. And I guess, I never went to the site, not that I ever would go to the site.
But Greg, it was advertised as a beacon of freedom.
Yeah. It's only freedom if you say what he wants to hear. Otherwise, it's not.
Well, this stuff was really, really bad. Nobody was proofreading any of it. It's just like, get an editor, Donald. How cheap are you? Just have somebody. There's an old saying in especially public radio circles, everybody needs an edit. Everybody needs an edit. And it's just, just get somebody to look at it. Find the typos. Find out when you're being idiotic. Have somebody that can actually look at that and say, are you sure you want to say this? Because the vast majority of the posts were just inane.
I have long believed that Donald Trump actually has an editor, and that editor's job is to go through and throw in random capitalizations, misspelled words, grammatical
exclamation points.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of exclamation points.
Loser! Exclamation point 4 times.
To add of America to the end of United States, because it just sounds Trumpier to say United States of America than just United States. And I think he does that because that's the way the people who love him write as well. And they recognize, when you turn in a polished piece of prose, it's like you're mocking them somehow. So, write like they do. So
so on the last day,
mistake and bad grammar.
On the last day, he had received just 1,500 shares or comments on Facebook and Twitter, which for him is really low. I've had a couple of tweets that got 1,500 comments, but like once or twice in my multi-year career of doing this. But for Donald Trump, he used to have 36 million people or whatever that were following his tweets. Now, he says that part of the reason they're killing this is because we're going to start this new social media site, but we see how well that's gone for other people that have tried to do it, whether it's Parler or some of these other places. Not sure that there's going to be much of a market for it, but anybody sad to see it go?
Sad?
Yes.
Sad?
Well, and staying on the Facebook theme, I don't know if you saw today, they said that they are going to get rid of their policy that gives more leeway to politicians to put crap on there. So they're basically Well, they're just saying, they were giving a lot of leeway to politicians, saying, well, it's politics, so they can exaggerate a little. They're saying, nope, we're not doing that anymore. If there's misleading stuff, it's all going to be gone. Good.
I think that's great.
Remember, of course, it's a good thing. All I can remember,
$1 short and a day late, I might say. But.
Yeah, it really is. All I have to say is I remember. I'm old enough now. I'm very old, and going to journalism school, and we talked about our role as gatekeepers. Right. I mean, this was very important. The idea that as a newspaper is not infinite in its news hole, with the space that it can devote to news, and so. The importance of being the person who makes the decision that we're going to run this story and not this story cannot be. I mean, this was something we talked about and read about and discussed. So we've gone from that to the internet era where it was just throw the crap out there. Don't worry about vetting it. Don't worry about accuracy. As long as if you print something that has a major error, as long as you fix it, the readers will forgive you. And then that attitude, that Silicon Valley libertarian, bullshit attitude, filtered into the new gatekeepers, which were Google and Facebook and all the social media and so forth, and they kind of came up with this idea like, hey, let's just turn the fire hose on and everybody can drink as they want. So I don't know. I mean, it's I see some eyes glazing over here, but it's interesting that the worm is turning. And we're coming back to the idea that maybe people who control these vast influential networks have some responsibility as to what goes on there.
Very good.
I mean, I hear you on that. The only thing I struggle with is I remember talking to a publisher for one of the dailies. She's since retired, who did not refer to the Free Press as a newspaper, but an entertainment platform. Which I thought was really
entertainment platform or information platform.
No, an entertainment platform. I was kind of shocked by that.
Editors aren't going to like that.
Yeah. I was kind of. Now I don't know if that attitude is still pervasive with Peter Baja over there. But I can say that as Facebook and Twitter and all these other places sort of struggle with being an information highway. I don't know whether or not they really have the tools to be a Nancy Derringer or a Craig Fahle, and when it comes to being able to sort through fact from fiction, and what's news and what isn't news. You know what I mean?
Well, how can they when they've got? I mean, they've got millions of users that are just pouring information onto into this thing all day long. It's like, you can't be a gatekeeper against. A flood. I mean, you have to have something that's manageable to begin with.
They have over-relied on their ability to create an algorithm to catch this stuff. They seem to think there's a way there's a way to program your way out of any problem, and frankly, it's just not there yet. And obviously, the misinformation people are steps ahead of any policing authority that's there, as we have witnessed for years and years on social media. Yet we're all still there because, frankly, it is such an important part of what we do. I mean, I
totally agree with you, but I'm curious. What disappoints me is the law's inability to keep up with the changes. I mean, you always had the ability to publish something. You and I could write something up, run down the Kinko's and pass it out, at an event if we want to. But the idea of privacy and slander and all that stuff, the laws don't seem to have been able to keep up with that. I mean, Steve, what's the deal with that, man? I mean, that's what I think. I think that,
well,
we can't even keep up with Europe.
What they say is that anybody that likes sausage or laws shouldn't watch the process of how they're made. I guess that's my answer. I mean, you can see it every day. It's just very difficult to get a lot of people to agree. I mean, for instance, I've always believed that the best way to make sure that the Facebooks of the world put accurate information up there is to allow them to be sued, so that the Ben Johnsons of the world can sue them, because that'll keep their butts in line. And yet, Senator Wyden, right from Oregon, one of the most liberal people there, was the author, I think, of the bill that gave them immunity from lawsuits. And to me, that's one of the reasons why it's difficult to pass laws. I mean, I'm a pretty liberal person, but if you want to stop some of this shit, let them get sued.
Gee, I could say the same thing about guns.
You just took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly true. You want to do something about guns, take away their immunity. So Colt can get sued and Glock can get sued. Absolutely.
All right, we've got to move on here. We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to get to schmucks in just a minute, but I did not want to let another week pass without mentioning Matt Gaetz. Now, apparently, the Justice Department is looking into whether or not he obstructed justice in the investigation that they are pursuing against his buddy. And maybe him, he's under some sort of investigation. We know that. We haven't seen any charges yet or anything like that. But Steve, I'm going to defer to you on this one. When you see these types of things being lobbed out there in the press, what does that tell you about where this investigation stands right now?
Number one, I think, just from what I've read, okay, I think it's a near certainty that he's going to be indicted. I'm not even talking about the obstruction of justice. You've got his buddy who's ratting on him, who's informing on him, and who participated, it sounds like, at least, in a lot of the events. And then from what I read, and maybe you guys know more than I, they've interviewed the young woman as well. And that's not going to be very hard to prove. Are you the woman? Yeah. Is that the guy? Yeah. And how old were you at the time? That's that. Okay? When it comes to obstruction of justice, you got to remember, classic obstruction of justice. See, what people who are watching too many movies and too many gangster TV shows, they think obstruction of justice means that, that they go and they grab some guy, they drag him off, throw him in a trunk so he can't testify in a case. That's TV stuff, and that'd be true. In addition to the murder, it would also be
right.
But obstruction of justice is a fairly simple thing to prove, in the sense that a phone call, and all I've done is read the same things you've read. If you make a phone call to someone who's in a position to do something about a case, and you start suggesting to that person, A, I think we should do this, and then B, there might be a few dollars in it for you if you do it. That's classic obstruction of justice. So, and let me say this. I know this guy's got a law degree, at least when you read, they say he's a lawyer. But my guess is, like so many people, including lawyers who don't do what I do for a living, they really honestly believe you can do stuff like that. You can call up the guy. You can say, look, just bring me $5,000 and I won't go to the police on you. Technically, that's obstruction of justice. So I don't know what the facts are, but if it involves calling someone who has information that could be incriminating and offering them something in return for them not providing that information, that's classic obstruction of justice.
Wow.
Yeah, he's squirming a little bit these days. Who's got the...
Somebody's got an echo going.
We have a nice echo here. I think that's Greg. There it is.
I put it on mute because my dog was.
Well, I heard barking. That. I appreciate both of those things. Hey, real quick, F. Lee Bailey passed away last night. Anybody see that? Speaking of defense attorneys, Steve, I mean, this guy, the Boston Strangler, he was on OJ's team. I can't tell you how many other high-profile cases this guy was on, but he was definitely a celebrity lawyer. There aren't a whole lot of those.
I think let's not forget the fact that he was disbarred, I think, in a couple of different places too. Okay.
Yes.
I thought that Bailey, and thinking back, they said he was 87, which would have made him 15 years older than me. I remember when I was coming up as a lawyer, he was a famous guy. But I think that he, like so many lawyers who were at one time famous for the right reason, they had big cases, they did a good job. I think that there are a lot of lawyers out there that don't want to fade go gently into the good night. And I think what happened with F. Lee Bailey, by attaching himself to the OJ case, for instance, he wasn't really the person who was really, it was like Dershowitz, they're around, but they're not really doing the case. Johnny Cochran won that case.
Yeah.
And Schenck won the case, Barry Schenck, with all of the cross-examination of the medical stuff. But I think a lot of these guys, they don't want to just realize, hey, I had a great career. It's like a ball player plays too long, right? I had a great career. Now I'll be an older statesman. I'll sit back and so the press won't be all over me all the time. He was unable to do that. And I think that's what caused him to end his career in not quite the same way that he began it. He stayed around too long, and he could not take the fact that he wasn't important anymore.
I call that
same way a lot.
I call that Mitch Albom syndrome.
Well, here's the really weird thing. Here's the really weird thing about the F. Lee Bailey death. Of course, he dies yesterday. Just like 2 days ago, I was watching old clips of the Dick Cavett show and F. Lee Bailey, they were on a panel discussing gun violence and ways to eliminate gun violence in the U.S. And this is back in like 1968 or something like that. Lauren Bacall was on with them, F. Lee Bailey. So, yeah, if you're on a TV show with Lauren Bacall having like a civilized debate, well, hey, good for F. Lee Bailey hanging out with Lauren Bacall. Anyway,
Steve, a quick question, related question. Is Jerry Spence still around? Is he still making waves? The guy that always wore the buckskin jacket with the fringe and the cowboy
Jerry
hat?
Spence, I tried the case with him, if you remember. He represented Feiger and I represented Venn. So we tried that case in front of Judge Borman 15 years ago, maybe. He's exactly 20 years older than me. If he had passed, we would have heard about it because he was a very famous guy. So I think at 92, he's still alive and kicking. And
that must have been a fun time in court with that group.
Did you get to touch the buckskin jacket?
No, but I can tell you real quickly, because I know we're getting to the end. He gave his closing first, then there was a lunch break, and then there was going to be me. And he was the type of guy, he had a bunch of sycophants that hung around with him. And a lady comes up to me as we're waiting to get back after the lunch break. She's wearing a buckskin jacket. She's just a citizen. She's a spectator. She comes up, she says, Mr. Fishman, you must be so nervous because, you've got to go in there and follow Mr. Spence. And I said, lady, let me tell you what makes you nervous. Shooting a 1-on-1 foul shot with 8,000 people screaming at you with 4 seconds to go in the game and you're down 1. This doesn't make me nervous.
All right.
Good.
We've got to get to schmucks of the week. And I've got 2. So I'm going to go first with one of them. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that it's Pride Month and that the schmuck of the week, one of my schmucks of the week, would focus on the issue of Pride Week. Well, there's a video that is making the rounds in the internet right now of a boat parade up in Washington State. And so what happened? And I don't have the names of these schmucks. It's too bad because there were some people that had a boat out there and had a pride flag flying on the back of the boat. And another boat came and started circling them. And they thought they were just coming up to say, hey, we like your flag, whatever. Instead, they started giving them the finger and they started yelling things about gays and flags and other slurs that they were putting out there. And they started circling their boat like in a threatening way. Well, a couple of minutes later, the people that were threatening the people with the pride flag, their boat caught on fire in the middle of the lake. The people have to jump out and get rescued by the people in the pride flag boat. And apparently they put up the video and they said, you know what? They didn't even say thank you when we got back to the shore. So schmucks of the week, the people that did this and their boat caught on fire. And of course, they could have just left your asses out there. They could have done that, called the Coast Guard, but they didn't. They were good people, unlike you.
I saw that. That was priceless.
That is one of my schmucks of the week. I got one more coming up a little bit later on. Who wants to go next?
Nancy.
Okay. Mine is kind of a letdown. I was so appalled.
It's never a letdown.
Well, I was so appalled by this Trump honestly believes that he is going to be reinstated in August. But apparently one of the people who is whispering in his ear and is encouraging him to believe this is Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy. And so he is my schmuck of the week. And
that's 2 weeks in a row for him.
Yeah, several weeks in a row. And so he may have like a sub, like a sub trophy. Like a first runner-up trophy. The Mike Lindell first runner-up schmuck of the week trophy. Anyway, he's still dropping these badly produced infomercials about the election. I understand that some more local people are going to be on one of them, and so that may be a future schmuck of the week. But for now, it's Mike Lindell.
Mike Lindell's always a good one, and I think it's time for the federal government to investigate just what he's stuffing those pillows with, because everybody who has this product is going insane. It's got to be some sort of toxic PFAS substance or something like that he's stuffing his pillows with, because otherwise I can't explain it. You know what, everybody? Good down pillows always work. I mean, it's
right.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
My schmuck of the week is anybody pushing a bill in the state legislature that seems to be getting some legs with those crazies, opposing critical race theory and teaching critical race theory as if it is like, some kind of poison. I mean, sometimes I wonder whether or not we are in the dark ages where people oppose science and reason and, critical thinking. The idea.
Didn't I say earlier in the show that this was a uniquely stupid period in American history, and you laughed at me? and said, "Oh no, we've been much stupider."
And when it comes to critical race theory and people suggesting that, well, we America's a great country and anything that says anything bad about America, we need to get away from. I ask anybody this: what movie would you rather watch? Some old John Wayne World War II movie or Saving Private Ryan? Which one would you rather watch? Would you rather watch The Green Berets with John Wayne, or would you rather watch Platoon to get an accurate picture of what happened in Vietnam?
I'm going to use that.
I mean, we can understand this. We can learn from our history. And just because we've done some shameful things in the past doesn't mean we can't continue to try and rise above it.
Yes.
If we don't learn from history, we will be doomed to repeat it. And it certainly seems as if a whole lot of people are trying to make us do that right now.
And can we also say very quickly, I'll let you go, Greg. I'm going to let you finish, that nobody is teaching critical race theory. Nobody's teaching it.
Except in law school. I mean, here's the other thing that troubles me about this kind of stuff is that we are this white guilt kind of like thing. Like, why are you trying to make my kids feel guilty about being white? I'm like, who's doing that? I don't. Where does that happen at? I've never seen that before. I mean, as a brother, I can understand. Like looking on a newscast and going like, seeing some kind of robbery or something like that and going, oh my God, I hope he's not black, and then hoping or learning not to accept the shame of somebody else's deed and applying it to an entire group of people, and maybe white folks just haven't learned that lesson. Maybe do you guys get ashamed? Are you guys ashamed of Gaetz and his like foolishness when it comes? Do you all feel like shame because of what Gaetz is going to be, convicted of? I don't think so.
No.
So, I don't get it.
But whenever a stupid story comes out of Grosse Pointe, I always feel like
I moved. I just up and moved. I'm like, yeah, I'm done with that. So,
all right. You know what? Let me tell you something.
Hey,
we
first
just
black
hired
officer at Grosse Pointe Park.
That's right. That's right.
Congratulations.
Ever in the entire,
I wanted to mention that today, and I'm glad you were here, Greg, for reminding me. Thank you.
Steve, it's awesome.
Steve, you got a schmuck of the week?
I do. I had a candidate, which would have been an old schmuck of the week, which would be Mr. Mike Pence, who gave a 40-minute speech.
What an
kissing Mr. Trump's butt again, even though we have a slight disagreement about what might have happened on January the 6th. I suppose to him, the phrase "hang Mike Pence" means let's just give him a little slap on his tush and we'll move on from there. But
he called you a wuss and a traitor.
He's not it. My schmucks of the week is a collective group as well, kind of like what Greg said. They start with the head of the French Open and they go on to the rest of the Grand Slam people who had the colossal gall to fine Naomi Osaka $15,000 and threaten her with being banned from the further Grand Slam tournaments because, God forbid, she didn't want to sit for one of those grillings after every match and listen to the dumbest goddamn questions on the planet. And I am here to tell you, I have listened to some of the things in those mass interviews after ball games, basketball or baseball. I've never heard a question that is, in my view, was worth answering.
Hey, Steve, why? Hey, Steve, tell me why you missed that shot. It's like, did you want to miss that shot?
So they're the schmucks of the week, but this is one of those instances where inadvertently, because they're such schmucks, they've actually advanced the ball because now she did what she did, and now Steph Curry comes in, and now Navratilova comes in, and now everybody's starting to say, hey, wait a minute. Maybe these people aren't Superman and Superwoman.
Well,
maybe
and they're so young.
In the history of the world, Michael Phelps comes out and starts talking about what he's gone through, and maybe it would wake up some of these people to say, these are not super people. Let's just make it optional. Some people love to gab, right? Mm-hmm. Just like in our group here. Are we going to drag some introverted person onto this thing and make her talk for an hour with all of us when it makes completely uncomfortable? So those guys were the schmucks of the week, but hopefully good things are going to come of it.
Good one.
I've got one sort of schmuck of the week nominee that I have to put out there, and this sort of relates to what Greg was talking about with critical race theory. Now, there was a little city called Hudson, Ohio. They're having a Memorial Day service the other day that was organized by the local chapter of the American Legion, and the person that they had was Lieutenant Colonel Barnard Kempter. Now, he is from Hudson, Ohio. He served in the Persian Gulf War, and he prepared a speech. And as he was delivering the speech, he got to a section in there where he was talking about the role that African Americans played in the earliest days of memorial type celebrations, going back to the Civil War era, and talking about how African Americans were singing John Brown's Body as the bodies were returning from the battlefields in the South. Now, interestingly enough, John Brown is from Hudson, Ohio. So again, a little more local history there. But the woman who was the organizer of this parade didn't want to hear anything about African Americans, so she cut off his microphone mid-speech. There was only about a 10-minute speech to begin with, and it was an uplifting and great story talking about the contributions of all Americans in coming together to create something called Memorial Day. And she didn't want to hear it. She took it upon herself to cut off the mic, and she is somewhat unapologetic, saying, well, I didn't approve that part of the speech, so I cut it off. She, needless to say, is getting raked over the coals all over the place today. The town of Hudson, Ohio is feeling Grosse Pointe Park's shame right now, Nancy Derringer, that they're being raked over the coals for doing something stupid. So that is my schmuck of the week. And just so you want, if you want to know this woman's name, I will give it to you right now. Her name is Cindy Suchan Rothgary. Cindy Suchan. If you look that up on Facebook, you can see the story for yourself. And the other person involved was a man named James Garrison. They are the ones that decided that this was not worthy of hearing. And that makes me
sure her name wasn't Karen.
My
mom's a Karen, and so is my sister-in-law. So I'm going to stop using the Karen.
Oh boy, you're leaving out one really important part there, Craig, and that is that the origin of Memorial Day came about. That's what she cut out.
Yeah.
That Black folks had invented Memorial Day out of honoring Civil War.
And that's what he was
soldiers that were killed. Yeah.
And that's what he was trying to explain. It was like literally about a minute and a half section of his 10-minute speech. And he was just trying to, again, talk about the contributions that everybody has made, right?
Yeah.
Again, just including the full story, which is something
1984, baby.
I mean,
Orwell was a genius. He was a genius.
Yep.
But, the town of Hudson, the AMVETs have come out. They've all said, sorry, this lady was wrong. We apologize. Everybody's saying we hate this decision. But it's stuff like this that's still going on because some people are so afraid of the truth and afraid that the narrative that they were taught a long time ago might not be the full story. Fear is what's driving this moronic stuff that we are seeing on display all across America. It's always been about fear. And I'll tell you what, until we can defeat that, we're going to be stuck in this loop for a long time. But social media does help in this regard because now all of America knows about the dumb stuff that happened in Hudson, Ohio. So with that,
people need to understand. Look, I love my country. I love America. And America's big enough and strong enough to face the truth of our collective history.
Get better from it. Get better from it. I mean, that's the whole thing. The desire to get better is what separates America, is that we try, at least we try to improve things. Doesn't mean we always succeed, but at least there's this attempt. Many of us want to attempt it. Some always fight against it, but hey. All right. Hey, with that, we've got to wrap it up real quick. Steve, just real fast. John Beilein got hired by the Pistons. I thought that was an interesting one. Is he that good with young players that he's going to help these young guys?
It's not necessarily a matter of good with young players. They're hiring them to the same thing that Rudy is doing now with Minnesota Timberwolves. People who've been in the game for a long time have an ability to look at players and get an idea as to whether they can help you. There are a lot of guys with big names and big numbers that they're not the right person for that particular place. And the fact that I'm glad he's back in the game, and I'm glad as hell that he's not coaching anymore. And another person who's as glad as me is his wife. I know that for sure because John and I have had that conversation. I think it's great for the Pistons. I think he'll be a really great person to help them get better. I think Weaver and Coach Casey are doing a great job there, and it's not going to be long before they're going to be pretty damn good. So I was happy to see it, and I was really happy to see he didn't get back into coaching. Every time I see Coach Izzo and look at him when he was young and look at him now, I think, God damn, Tom, you got to find something else to do. This is going to kill you.
The blood pressure is not good in that type of a situation.
Retiring, so that tells you,
Well, yeah, he's 76 though, isn't he? Something like that.
75, I think, is what they say.
Okay. Well, either way, that's a story for another day. We get into Duke basketball. All right, we got to wrap it up. I want to thank Steve Fishman for being here. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. Your insight is always appreciated.
It was a pleasure as usual, particularly that Greg was here too to help me out.
Oh, you're too kind.
Greg Bowens, thank you. We appreciate your help as always. And again, thanks for stepping up last minute, pinch hitting, Manny Mota. Thanks. Good job, Greg.
Happy to be here.
Right.
Anytime I can be on screen with Nancy Derringer is a good day.
I'm sorry, I don't have a sports metaphor for, I just show up. So
Well, that was actually an airplane metaphor as much as a sports metaphor there. But Nancy Derringer, thank you very much for being here as always. Thanks to Allan Lengel, who had to leave us a little bit early today. Check out DeadlineDetroit.com for all kinds of great coverage of things happening in our town. Become a member, DeadlineDetroit.com/membership. Also, thanks to Michael Lucido for engineering this broadcast, and thanks to Lynette's Shrimp House for sponsoring this show and Deadline Detroit. We certainly do appreciate that. Thanks to all of you who have commented, watched, listened, and boy, a lot of you are downloading the podcast version of this lately, which is fantastic. Thank you. Don't forget, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It all helps a ton, and we love it. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody, and go out. Go do something. You don't have to stay home safely anymore, especially if you've been vaccinated. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Okay.
You too.
The Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davidson, Lynette's is open for takeaway noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's.